What's up, triple podcast cross listeners, triple cross podcast listeners? Rough start, but we're going. This week we are talking hoops. It's Saturday. It's hoops time. We're talking Ben Simmons. We're talking Klay Thompson. They're playing good again. We're talking shakers and movers in the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. Who's on the come up? Who is sliding down the rankings? And we're going to pick some of this week's key matchups coming up on Triple Cross. Let's go.
Lillard with 47 tonight, working it down to 2-1, a deep three. Blazers win the series, a walk-off three for Damian Lillard.
Samuel, wide receiver screen, good play, big play, and in for the touchdown.
And Turner looks for the deep left field. Ranging back is Profar, and it's a 1-0 start for the Dodgers.
Second batter of the game, and the Dodgers take a 1-0 lead.
All right. What's up, Casey? How you doing?
Hey, John. I'm doing all right, my man. I'm excited to see you, of course, but also talk a little sports as we've been doing a little bit of recently.
Yeah, as we do here on Triple Cross. I'm John. That's Casey. Our names aren't on this one. That's how we do it.
I got you.
We're talking NBA. We're talking hoops. We're gonna try and keep it pretty tight this week because there's some games tonight that we want to catch. So, first up, I don't think we can talk about NBA this week without talking about Mr. Ben Simmons and Mr. Klay Thompson. We have been dunking on Ben Simmons, not literally, metaphorically. We've been metaphorically dunking on Ben Simmons multiple times, like for a few weeks. There's been more than 1 week this year that we've kind of been pretty down on Ben Simmons. But Simmons bringing it together, and Klay, people have kind of been writing him off as well this year. He's been bringing it together as well. John Morant chimed in. John Morant got on the Twitters, on the internet machine. Have you heard of this?
I haven't heard of it.
Newfangled Twitters, something to do with Elon Musk. I don't know.
It's a rocket ship. Got it.
Yeah, it's like a rocket ship that is doesn't run on gas, and you can say things on there. Anyway, John Morant, Ben and Klay been hooping. He said this earlier today, I think. Nope, yesterday it looks like. Ben and Klay been hooping, and everybody quiet now. Mm-hmm. That's John Morant. That's all he had to say. Obviously, lots of responses there. Casey, your take. You're a Warriors fan. Like, what do you think here? Like, did you write Klay off?
Man, honestly, it's not even like it's nothing personal. It's nothing even as a fan. Like, I'm not saying I don't believe, believe in the team and that's the guy. Of course it is. But like player slump for one, Klay, I will admit, is personally frustrating to me because I already did a little dance with him this year in fantasy where I was thought I was buying like an injury dip and then got burned by that because he just was kind of playing, let's just say he was playing bad. But it looks like he's getting his legs back under him a little bit. I don't know if it's more of a mental or a physical thing. I don't know what the case may be, but hey, let's just fingers crossed, hope he can keep doing it. And I guess I'm in the same category with Ben Simmons on it too. Like, good for him, I guess.
I specifically remember saying a few weeks ago that I am going to assume that this is the new Ben Simmons. This meaning like the crappy Ben Simmons that we've been seeing at the beginning of the season. Yeah, I said I'm going to assume that this is the new Ben Simmons until he shows me otherwise, right? Like so really, I had in a sense written Ben Simmons off, but maybe took a page out of the Geno Smith book. He just didn't write me back. So this is interesting. Klay hooping last 5 games: 20 points versus the Jazz, 18 versus the Clippers, 41 versus the Rockets, but it is the Rockets, 20 versus the Knicks, and 19 versus the Suns. I think this guy's got the best point. It depends how many shots he took. Efficiency is vital, especially if you're Klay Thompson and you're not just fully greenlit. So let's talk about that. Klay over the last 5 games, because this is when he started picking up, was about 5 games ago. He did sit one. So this is technically 6 Warriors games ago, but the Warriors sat like all of their main dudes in one game.
Gotcha.
So over the last 5 games, he's averaging 31.8 minutes. 22 points per game. He's 26 of 51 from the 3-point line. Quick math will tell you that's over 50%. He's shooting 51% from the 3-point line over the last 5 games. 40 of 82 from field goal. So that's 48%. 3.6 rebounds per game, 1.6 assists, 0.8 steals, and 2.2 turnovers. It's good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how it's good. It's fine. It's good. It's not like incredible.
What level of player would this be an exciting line for?
Right. You know? Exactly. You know, I
if this was a rookie,
yeah.
You're impressed, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, if this was a third-year player
on the Golden State Warriors, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. If this was a third-year player on, random team X, but involved in the game plan, you'd be excited. You'd be happy with it. Like, I think part of it is just like the what you expect. Expectation is high.
Yes. And that's a good point.
I think maybe it's easier to kind of celebrate Ben Simmons a little bit because of that, right? Because like, hey man, we don't know if this is gonna last. Like, let's celebrate him while we can, even if you don't believe it'll stick around. Like, he hasn't set the bar as high for himself, so you kind of want to be like, hey man, good for you, dude. Like,
it's a good point. So Klay, it depends what you think he is now, right? Is 22 points a game good for Klay? Well, that depends what you think he is. Is 51% from 3-point land good? Yes. Yes. Under any circumstances, yes, it's good. That, to me, this is exactly what you need out of Klay Thompson. You need him to hit more than half of his threes because he gets a lot of open ones. Mm-hmm. And the other thing you need from him is to be that 3-and-D force that he is. And that's what I'm not seeing. Nothing exciting on the defensive end. In fact, and this was not in the last 6 games, but I think 7 games ago or 8 games ago, Luka was targeting him. Luka was trying to get the switch onto him. Like, that's like, okay, it's one thing if you're not the defensive force you once were, but when you're getting targeted by other teams, like, that's the matchup I want. Like, oof, that is not great, right? Like, when there's Stephen Curry on the floor and you're getting targeted on defense, like, that's pretty bad,
But how much to Klay's game is there a little between the lines, between the stat lines? I mean, like, I have to imagine that there's not 4 other people Steph wants on the court with him more, like, it's more than Klay.
It's not like Draymond. I mean, Draymond's whole thing is kind of between the stat lines, right? Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of, that's his running mate at this point. But to be fair, I think they're kind of like, look, if all he is a 3-point specialist, that's fine. But he's got to hit 50%, So if he keeps playing like this, that's totally okay.
I think that's fair. I also think it's fair to have a phased approach towards that kind of role, maybe. Like, so I'm like, I think this is a stepping stone to that role, maybe, and
right.
And although, like, hey, just because we said it on Triple Cross podcast, is that like for sure what they're talking about in the locker room, like the Warriors locker room?
Probably, yeah.
Like, we have we have our fingers on the pulse of the NBA, no doubt. But right. I guess like there's a lot of factors going on, and like what's really the ramification of Klay isn't the Klay of old exactly. Is it burn the house down? No, it's like, okay, well then other people got to pick it up. Like Wiggins, let's go. Like, that's the guy you want to see budding, continue to bud.
There is a direct
continue
correlation.
To blossom. You wouldn't want him to bud. That would be like
blossom. But like, Jordan Poole, you want Jordan Poole really to be budding.
That's
right?
True. Yeah. He needs to bud up.
Yeah, he needs to just be a bud. So the Dubs, Klay Thompson's good play does seem to have a very strong correlation with winning. They started
it does, bro.
Out 6-9. They went 4-1 in the past week, and they're even now. They're 500. So if that continues, I mean, yeah, then they're happy, right? Then they're going to be back into where they belong in the standings, at least in their opinion. So, yeah. Moving on to Ben Simmons, though. Benny 1 point. This is let me read you his stats over the last 5. 16.4 points per game. 33 of 43 from field goal. So that's 76%. 0 3-point attempts. That's normal. 7.2 rebounds per game. 6.4 assists per game. 1.4 steals, 1.4 blocks, and 2.6 turnovers. Those are all like normal. Those are all like in line with career stats for Ben Simmons.
So I think you mentioned something originally about Klay, but I think it factors in just as much to Simmons or maybe more. Like, okay, like this is improved play, but like, is it efficient? And I mean, the field goal percentage is solid.
That's normal Ben Simmons stuff, though. It's all around the rim.
Yeah, I mean,
those are so. These are all of his stats over the last 5 games are very in line with career stats for Ben Simmons. About 15, 16 points, about 7 to 9 rebounds, or 7 to 9 assists. So it's like, hey, all right, like, look, if you can play like kind of career level basketball, I think that's all the Nets really were hoping for out of you. They were just hoping for you not to be that guy who's like.
That's what I mean. You're still like, even though you're the same, you can take a handful of salt and throw it into like a sugary drink and ruin that drink. Or you can take a handful of salt and throw it onto like another dish and it's exactly what's needed, right? It's still the same handful of salt though. So I think that's and can you expect like if this is a better situation, can you expect that play to improve a little bit more? Like probably development probably happens a little bit better in that kind of scenario. So
in those last 5 games, the Nets have won 3 of them. But they dropped to Philly without Joel Embiid, and they dropped to Indiana. Now Indiana is pretty hot right now. A little more bail I'll throw Ben Simmons. Actually, props. I usually am not a big Ben Simmons guy. And it goes back. It is personal.
That's not true. You're big on making fun of him.
Yeah, right. I do enjoy making fun of Benny one point, but it's because I'm a Jazz fan and like as a sophomore, he won Rookie of the Year. This is my biased opinion because he was like injured as a rookie, so they like didn't count it as his rookie year. And so in his second year, he won Rookie of the Year when I thought Donovan Mitchell should have won Rookie of the Year. Now as it's played out, Jason Tatum is the best rookie from that year, but and Donovan Mitchell's probably second. But so I still like have these like bad feelings towards Ben Simmons. But I'm gonna throw him bail here because this I'm very impressed by. He had his return to Philly this week. They booed him. They were already booing him last year. They were booing him while he was still in a Philly uniform.
Yeah. Yep.
Classic Philly. They'll let you know. Against Philly this week, 11 points, 11 assists, 7 rebounds, 3 steals. Very solid Ben Simmons-esque stat line. They didn't win, but I don't know. When you only score, when you're the dude who people are happy if you score like 20, like that's not going to be on you to get the win, right?
For sure.
So no, I don't know. I'm actually a little more like, I think with Klay, we're seeing slightly under career level play, but we're like, okay, but this would be all right. We'd be fine with this, right? The Warriors are probably fine with this. Whereas with Ben Simmons, we're like, well, at least we're seeing career level play, like that's what he should be doing as a, whatever, if he is a 5th or 6th year, like he's in his prime. Klay is older.
I think to be fair, not everybody hits their prime. Doesn't actually mean the same thing for everybody. Just, on paper, right. Like you want to say this age to this age, based off of like style of play or whatever maybe. But like, I mean, somebody like him could break that mold too. There are late bloomers, there are early risers who kind of fade too, like across every sport. So I don't know. So I guess my question is, does this change your thoughts about Ben Simmons at all? Just if him playing his regular career level ball, he's just doing that. Even if it's better for this, are you in? Are you out? Like you were not particularly in on him before.
I think he could continue to play like this. I think the one more thing I would like to see from him is he does still seem to be he traditionally has gotten like quite a few points from the free throw line because he's big, he's fast, he's physical, especially for a point guard, and he gets to the rim, he finishes well, and then he gets to the free throw line. He still does seem a little timid to get fouled. And that was one of the things that he was struggling with, is like, he's coming off an injury. I get it, Sure. I would like to see that from him, but I do think that he could sustain this style of play. So actually, let me actually call that out. I think that's the difference between these two guys, because I do think Ben Simmons could sustain this style of play. I could definitely see that happening. I don't think Klay will sustain this style of play. Like, I don't think he's going to continue to shoot 51% from the 3-point line. That's high. No matter how open the shots are.
Sure.
And if he doesn't, then the rest of his play is kind of like a little unexcited. It's kind of like I said.
What if he picks up a little bit more of that defensive kind of juice that he used to have?
Right. Maybe if he did, that would be better.
Then that you drop the bar down a little bit on the other side, and he's a true 3-and-D guy again. Still, like,
sure,
just kind of carries himself a little different. I guess I'm not worried about either guy. I think probably I could still see Klay like continuing to impress in this way because I think he does have a higher ceiling as just a performer, as just an athlete, I guess. Like maybe not ceiling, maybe not true ceiling, because that's like kind of Ben Simmons' thing.
I know what you're trying to say. He's a little
like
bit more
realistic ceiling.
He's a little more of a gamer than Ben Simmons.
Right. And I mean, he's one of those guys where maybe just to spite people who would ever talk bad about him, he just puts up career numbers for maybe a short stretch, like when needed or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard this guy is pretty clutch. So like come the playoffs, who's more likely to affect playoff outcomes if these teams make the playoffs? That's what I'm looking at, I guess. And I'm like, oh, Klay by a mile. I mean, unless you count Ben Simmons choking and losing the game.
As of now, yeah. I mean, Ben Simmons has made one deep playoff run. But yeah. Moving on, though, kind of what I wanted to do mainly on this, I did want to give Ben Simmons, Klay their due and their props, especially because, when I make fun of a player and then they turn around and they're actually playing pretty good, just like with Russell Westbrook, I want to at least acknowledge, like, yes, this person is playing good, but still I'm probably going to make fun of him. But what I really want to do with this episode is kind of just give a high level overview on the team side of who's moving, of who's who are the shakers and movers here. Can you see that? Should we zoom in a little?
Yeah, actually, I think if you're up for an experiment here, I think this view could be helpful here. Maybe
yeah.
That works.
Could you get rid of our top banner? Maybe.
Yeah, I can. Hold on here. Go ahead. I'll change that out though.
Oh, I can't zoom in here. Okay. Yeah.
There's that a little better.
Okay. Yeah,
hey,
maybe
that toolbar. Nice toolbar you got there, John.
Oh, you know what? We can't actually move ourselves in this view. You know what I mean?
We cannot. Oh, you don't like that? Okay. All right.
Yeah. No. Yep. Okay. Cool. So,
this is stuff we do on the fly here.
This is how we roll. Okay. So maybe a little bit hard to see here. I cannot zoom in. Sorry, kids. Yep. Present full screen.
Hey, we're getting there.
We know things and stuff. All right. So later in the season, you don't see a lot of standings movement, right? Once we get 50, 60 games in, it's just hard. But right now in the Western Conference, look, first to all the way down at the Warriors at 11th, we're 3 games spread, right? So so movement happens. So basically what this is, what I'm laying out here is from Friday of last week through Friday of this week. So not including today, Saturday, where the teams have moved in the standings. So if you're listening to this, we'll just go through it. The Suns have risen 5 spots. So the Suns are in first in the West as of the time of this podcast. And they were fifth in the West last week. They went 2-1 this week with the wins over the Knicks and the Lakers and lost to Utah.
They would have been 6th, right? They went up 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, they were maybe in 6th.
I got it.
Yep.
Subtraction. Let's go.
So
math
Suns
for the win. It's a math pod. We're a math pod.
Suns going from 6th all the way to 1st this week. That said, it's not that impressive of a week for them. Right? Good job. You beat the Knicks and the Lakers.
Sure.
Congrats. And you lost to Utah, who dropped 4 spots in the regular. This had a way more to do with the Blazers and Utah losing ground and the Grizzlies not really doing anything this week than it did with the Suns really playing all that well. Honestly, the story of this whole thing is the Warriors are the only team that really played well this week with a 4-1 record over the course of the week and no movement. They were in 11th and they're still in 11th. And it's just because all they did was just close this gap between 11th and 10th. But yeah, I mean, big losers this week were the Trailblazers, who went 1-3 and went from 1st down to 5th. Jazz, that went 1-3 and went from 2nd down to 6th. I guess first question there is is this more realistic? The Blazers lost Dame earlier this week. So they lost Dame in their matchup with the Jazz, I want to say. Yes, they did. They lost Dame in their matchup with the Jazz, which was early in the week. I think it was the first matchup of the week. So them I can understand a little more. But what do you think about the Jazz? I mean, this is weird because I'm a Jazz homer. What do you think about the Jazz? Is this okay, here's reality setting in?
I think there's a little of that, right? Like you can't ignore this just the same way you couldn't ignore what was going on early. Like it's all part of the story. It's all kind of crafting the narrative as we go. But like I think we have a tendency to over project based off of like really recent momentum. Right. And I think that we're just finding the true average kind of in here somewhere. And it's not to say that it's right in the middle of kind of these two sides that maybe we're seeing, but it's like we're finding the range of play here and kind of how these teams stack up against each other a little bit more, reaching that data significance point. I always think it's interesting when like digits start to come into play, like multiple digits. Like it really stands out when teams are hitting double digit losses now, right? Like, hey, that seems like that's a break in the pack a little bit. Like even the Dubs, like yikes, like we're in dangerous territory. Lucky they're one of the teams with double digit wins too. So like, okay, but like, we got to like stomp on the gas pedal at some point,
Right.
Sorry, that was not really about the Jazz, but what I mean is like, I think they're gonna be a fine team. We can't overreact here either. How much can you really think differently than last week, 7 days ago? Like, I don't think all that much different about them.
Yeah. So if you look at this game by game, we have they beat the Blazers. In that game, Dame left. He played 27 minutes though. Played 27 minutes and then you left the game. Mike Conley left in the same game, right? So they lost Mike Conley, and both of them have been out since, I believe. So the Jazz go on a slide this week without Mike Conley. Now, like if you look at it on the surface, it's like, okay, but without Mike Conley, but they still have Markkanen, they still have Clarkson. Like it's not like Mike Conley is like this big, make or break guy, but he is, because he's the maestro of the offense, right? So. Sure. Mike Conley.
And also, isn't there a case to be made, like if there's an extended absence, that like probably the worst results you're going to yield are like at the beginning of that absence when they haven't really figured out the way around the problem a little bit. Like I think there's a realistic like path to.
I don't know. Honestly,
maybe you find out there is no great path. You're like, I mean, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's like maybe Jordan Clarkson tries to do his best Mike Conley impression at first. And then when it's not working, he's just like, all right, well, I'm just going to shoot up shots now. Like I'm just going to do my Jordan Clarkson impression. Honestly, as I look at this game by game, a loss to the Clippers. The Clippers are one of those teams that are so frustrating because they're like pound for pound, matchup by matchup. If you look at the 8-person rotation of the Clippers versus any other team in the league, you might look at it and be like, oh, the Clippers have the best players in the league. Like their first best player against someone else's first best player, their second best player against someone else's, their third versus someone else's fourth, fifth, all the way down to like 8th, right? Like Norm Powell, who's probably their 6th or 7th best player, gave us like 30. Reggie Jackson gave us like 30, right? So that's the thing about the Clippers is, and Isaiah Thomas said it earlier this week. He's like, if these guys get it figured out, they're really going to get it figured out. Like their biggest problem is they just cannot figure out this whole situation with the load management and like people not playing. So Kawhi played this week. He was on a minutes limitation of 25 minutes, but then Paul George is out, right? So that's the biggest issue with the Clips. So a loss to the Clips when the Clips are hot, that's just going to happen. They're really good when they're good.
What's interesting about kind of like who you're talking about here, like with the Jazz, I feel like you're talking about a team that we're not sure if they're borderline, like if we look at this and break it into thirds almost, like are they a top third or a middle third team? And even with the Clippers, even though that record is a little bit better, I think that middle third ish, maybe more like the 7 to 11 range is kind of like who's who in this area. Nobody knows, but it looks like from the Jazz up, there's kind of a different category going on there. Potentially, maybe the Jazz are borderline, like we said, and then like those bottom 4 stand out in a big way too. I know we're talking about the Clippers now, and I guess that's how I'm looking at it. Like, are the Clippers better than the Warriors? Are they better than the Timberwolves? Are they better than the Mavericks? Are they better than the Kings? And those are the questions I feel like you're asking here.
That's the kind of what I'm looking at with the Jazz list this week. If I break it down game by game, you got to win over Portland. You got a loss to the Clippers when they're cooking. And when the Clippers are cooking, they're going to win.
So as a Jazz fan, you're not totally sure you hold the Jazz in that next echelon kind of.
You got a loss to the Warriors when the Warriors are cooking. You know what I mean? And then you got a loss to the Pistons. That's pretty bad.
And I don't mean necessarily just talent. I mean like situation, right? Like, the Warriors don't want to be sitting at 10-10.
No. I think the Warriors, if Klay even does similar to how he's been doing, then we're going to see the Warriors make some moves.
Like, don't you think that everybody above the Jazz is pretty stoked to be where they're at, and even the Jazz themselves too. But like anything kind of below that, it's a little bit more like probably have some mixed feelings. Maybe the Kings you put in that category. I guess.
I would say Suns, Nuggets, Grizzlies all expect to be there. In first, second, third, they all expect to be in the top 5. Clips, Mavericks, Warriors probably are lower than they expect to be.
But like the Pels, the Blazers, like largely without Dame, being up there, like it's a pleasant surprise. And I think even the Jazz. That's why I mean, like this middle chunk we're talking about is a little bit like how do these teams actually stack up? And maybe you're counting the Jazz there.
I think.
Do you really believe that about the Clippers, though, that they might be the most talented, top heavy or middle heavy? Roster.
Yes, like in terms of how good their players are, player by player. Like if you go player by player on the Clippers, match them up against any other team.
Is that really how the NBA works?
No,
though?
It's obviously not. Right.
Right.
The Clippers they've not been to a finals with this squad. They've made a Western Conference.
That's like if you said that about a baseball team to me, I'm like, so what? If the other team has like this starting pitcher that just wrecks everybody, I don't care who you got. Like on average in the field, like you need some superstars to contend.
So, but that the thing is, like, let me put it this way: if the Clippers are hot, it doesn't matter who they're playing and how hot that team is. The Clippers are going to win. Yes.
Wow.
That's my take on the Clippers. Right.
That feels
their problem is they're just like not hot a lot of the time.
Sure.
Like it doesn't matter if it's the Bucks, Celtics, and they're playing good. If the Clippers are cooking and they're firing on all cylinders, there's just too many good dudes.
Interesting. So John, you're in love with the Clippers. Clearly, you're a Clippers fan.
Kind of like don't like the Clippers, but like
not a Jazz fan. You're all Clippers Nation now.
Yeah, I guess. It's tough to be.
I have a question for you, actually. Like, if we can go off script here real quick.
Yeah.
Those like chunks I talked about, those bottom 4 really stand out to me. It's like, hey, we're in a different situation than all the other teams here. At what point, and this is a little education to me, like at what point and what are the actions of teams that just kind of go like, well, this is shaping up to be a lost season, and when does that at least come into discussion, or at least like into the mindset of staff, players, management, things like that? Maybe you can fill me in a little bit on that.
Yeah, so at the bottom you got like Thunder, Lakers, Spurs, Rockets. Rockets, Spurs, Thunder are all pretty aware that they're young and they're rebuilding. The Lakers have no idea what they're doing down there, right? So they're like, there's just
is it deny and just hope it turns around still? Are we in that phase?
They have no other choice. Like they've got 2 picks to trade, and I don't think that they really could get much for them. So like, that the Lakers, that is just an awful spot for them to be. And maybe at some point it will turn around. It is a long season, but that's just the Lakers have no idea what they're doing down there. You're right. And the Warriors were actually in that category last week as well. If you look at the games back, those bottom ones, they're like more games back. What I was going to say about the Jazz slide though, is I do think there's a little bit of normalizing happening. And I've been cautiously optimistic about the Jazz the whole time, but if you actually look, like, let's say they just beat the Pistons, that they definitely should have won that game, right? We shouldn't lose games. It's bad to lose games that you should win, but it happens to every NBA team. Then they would be in third, because all of the teams from third all the way to sixth are 1.5 games back. So if they gained half a game by beating the Pistons, they would be in third, right? So yeah, I mean, there's just tight spacing right now. That's all it is. Any other call outs in the West as you're looking at this? Timberwolves 3-1 this week and no movement in their ranking.
Nothing in particular other than, I really appreciate you taking the time to make this beautiful graphic so that people can look at and understand what we're seeing.
Yeah, maybe we should post
I especially like the movement metrics. Those are nice.
Thank you. Thank you for Casey knows that making this just like pissed me off.
Some of these things, they look easier to make than they actually are, and at least they look quicker to make than they actually are.
If you're listening to this audio only, we will post the graphic that we're talking about. It just basically shows the standings week over week, and it shows how much each team has moved. We'll post it on our Instagram, which is at Triple Cross Podcast. So that's the West. Should we talk East? East is a little more interesting. A lot more non-movement in the East. But the call outs from this week would be Celtics doing normal Celtics things, going 3-1. Bucks going 2-2, but the Celtics a loss to Chicago. Yeah, so we'll get to Chicago.
Hold on, can we? Yeah, can we not? Yeah, let's not blow through this. Let's give the Celtics their due here.
Yeah,
Especially.
I mean, look, we expect them to do this at this point. Like that's what.
Is that you're so okay? Look into John's point of view on athletics. I think it's fair to say is John has always been an elite athlete, right? And he D1 runner for anybody who doesn't know. And John can have a bit of an elitist view on performance in sports. And I mean, you're just like, we expect them to be good now. I mean, you don't want to like give me an MVP. Who's what maybe even somebody you would expect, not you'd expect right out of the gate. Like who's the guy who needs credit given to him on the Celtics from your point of view? Like,
so Tatum is a legitimate MVP candidate this year. His game, I've said this before on the pod. Like it's rare to see an elite like all-star level player really improve their game year over year. Like they do it, but it's like, oh, if you watch them from 3 years ago, you can see they've added some stuff to their bag.
Right.
He has like, I mean, they lost, and I think he just took that in a pretty short window because he's playing until basically July. When he goes to the finals, comes back in October, and the dude has added a lot to his game. He's
talking about like a metamorphosis, really, like a level up.
I mean, it's tough because it was like he was already good, right? But like, like Tatum to me is a guy who, and they never consider players like Tatum for this award, but like Tatum to me is a guy who could win both MVP and Most Improved this year. He would never be considered for Most Improved, but like that's the level of improvement that I think we've seen from him this year, which is insane. Jaylen Brown is actually in the bubble race. Like he's not in the top 10, but he's in the bubble race for an all-star bid too.
That's kind of what I was fishing for. Maybe is like Tatum, I think seems like the obvious answer, but like, is there more to what's going on there than just
Jaylen Brown he's been playing good, right? But like not incredible, it's like,
you don't think he's hit peak potential yet is what you're saying basically, right? Like there's room still to improve. Like the kind of change that you've seen.
Let me put it this way. I don't think Jaylen Brown's ceiling is as high as Jason Tatum's. So yes and no. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yes, he could he's not as impressive as Jason Tatum, but within what Jaylen Brown is, it's still very impressive. He's improved as well. Like he's done right. He doesn't have the ceiling Jason Tatum does in terms of like pure physicality. And that's the other thing about Tatum. Like look at him year over year. Look at his physicality year. Like he's gotten stronger, and he was already pretty yoked. Like
I will say this, and maybe it's like kind of a weird thing to say, but like dynamic wise, like they feel like a good harmony to each other. Like the amount of like the expectation is kind of carried. Jaylen doesn't have to be the guy.
Yes.
Which feels like he's the perfect kind of player for that. Like you're a good, solid running mate.
He's so if you're gonna have two very similar type of players that are both like the guy, like the all-star level player, having two guys who are like guard forward combos is the way. Like right. So like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, they're like a better version of that. Yeah, they're like a better version of that kind of like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George at their best.
Are you saying that Boston's a better version or?
Yeah, so Kawhi Leonard, Paul George at their best might be better, but they're not. Those two are never even playing at the same time, right? Like
who's Kawhi? Who's Kawhi? I've never heard.
Yeah, let me put it this way: Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are what everybody was hoping Kawhi Leonard and Paul George could be, and everyone in the West was afraid Kawhi Leonard and Paul George would be. That's what Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are right now.
There it is. Clip it. That's the clip. We take that, and that's going on the socials too.
Yeah, editor. That's.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack your East convo with the Celtics. I just thought it was like, I mean, come on, we can't just go right past one. It's pretty incredible streak they're on here. Not streak, but run.
Yeah, 15-4. I mean, they've won the last 4 games. So Bucks 2-2. I mean, usually going 500 is enough to hold your spot at least for a while in the East. The Cavs. I want to give the Cavs credit here. They've gained only, I mean, they've had a good year all year, but they gained only 1 spot this week. They went from 4th to 3rd, but they went 4-1 on the week. They had a busy week. 5 games is a busy week, and they won. Man, they beat Charlotte, they beat Miami, they beat Atlanta, they beat Portland. They only lost to Milwaukee. Like, and that's like a legitimate, okay, yeah, like sometimes you're going to lose to like maybe the team that might win the championship, right? So yeah, great week for them. Pacers have been on a tear for 2 weeks. So the Pacers hold their spot at 4th, which actually don't know how that's possible. How did the Cavs gain 1 spot and the Pacers hold their spot? That doesn't make any sense. So the Pacers must have lost 1 spot or gained a spot. Oh, the Pacers must have gained a spot because the Hawks lost 2. Okay, so the Pacers actually gained a spot from 5th to 4th, and they went 4-1 on the week too. And they've been on a tear for 2 weeks. And I feel like we shouldn't, like, I'm kind of downplaying the Pacers. Like, I haven't talked about them at all, but like, they're in 4th in the East, and we've not even said anything about them. Casey, you got Halliburton in fantasy and Miles Turner in fantasy. Like, you got anything to say about the Pacers?
Man, I'm glad you put the ball on the tee like that for me. I don't know what the basketball version of that metaphor would be like. I'm glad you put the balls on a rack for me.
Like, I threw the lob up for you.
There you go. Thank you. Because fantasy is especially how I feel connected to the Pacers because I have that stack of Hallie and Turner, and Jury was out on some, and to be honest, that's where I see a lot of the majority of the performances is through like a fantasy app, looking at box scores, as opposed to like watching every minute of the Pacers play, if we're being real. So like Jury was out a little bit on from me on Turner, kind of saw him as maybe like what to expect, especially like, dealing with injuries early in the year. Like I don't always have faith in guys like kind of diving right back into the game with both feet and like really playing solid ball. And even if they do, I'm like, well, that seems like one of those things where you get excited about and then they let you down. But this guy's the real deal. I mean, he's showing that he's like a real player. And I think it's one of those other things that equates to team success. And I mean, for what it's worth too, especially having a view on both of those guys over most players on the team, seems like there's a little, a correlation with Hallie kind of going off a little bit too. Maybe it just takes a little pressure off of everywhere. And I think that could be something that really you look back at the year-long view of this team and you go like, man, getting that piece back was monstrous.
TJ McConnell had a slow start, but he's come into his own over the last couple weeks. He's had a couple double games with high steals, which is classic TJ McConnell. Like he'll score 10 points but get 15 assists and 8 steals, and which is like a great compliment to a guy like Halliburton. You know what I mean? Buddy Hield's been shooting the ball well. I mean, like the Pacers look good, and I'll say something that I don't know, maybe as a Gonzaga fan and as maybe longtime Pacers fans might not love this. Might be a little unpopular. The fact that the Pacers were running their offense through Sabonis for so long, like maybe that was holding him back, to be honest, because Miles Turner and Sabonis are an awkward fit together. Like you got this center that you run the ball through, that you run your offense through, and then you got Miles Turner that like, what else is he besides a center rim protector, right? Like, so they had this kind of like Cat Towns, Rudy Gobert thing going on. And like the best it did for him is get him like the 6th seed in a weak Eastern Conference. So, I mean, I like this. I like Hallie. Like I've liked him since his rookie year.
Hallie's like a newer guy on my radar, right? Like I've been more of a casual basketball fan. Definitely still am. Not claiming to be much more, honestly, but especially in like fantasy, it's funny the way we have our format set up. I do this thing that you don't need to do, but we have to fill like a point guard, shooting guard, and then like flex positions, right? And I think like, hey, if they were actually playing these positions, who would it be? And I have him and SGA kind of as my 2 guys. I'm like, who's more the point guard? Who's more that shooting guard type of guy? And at first, I'm looking at Hallie like, man, this dude puts up double digits assists on the regular. He averages over 11 assists a game. I'm like, that's my point guard, clearly, right? Because I have this like 90s view of like this guy. He just needs to distribute. He doesn't do anything else. And of course, at like first glance, I look at SGA and he puts up more points. He puts up over more than 10 points per game average than Hallie. But then I look at the friggin' shooting, like the 3-point shooting by Hallie. I'm like, Hallie can drop bombs. He's got the he's got the
that's a classic point guard, right? Distribute and be a threat,
Yeah, and I think that's it. Is like with more opportunity to be a threat, and with that being looking like make the difference in games a little bit more. I think he's one of those guys who has that DNA in him to rise to the occasion and be one of those guys who you see evolve into the player that your team needs him to become when the other pieces are there.
But that's been the criticism.
I'm riding high on him now,
That's been the criticism of him is that like, does he really have that killer instinct, right? We haven't seen it yet, but maybe that's something that develops. Maybe that's something you don't have in your first or second year in the freaking NBA, right? So the
whole take on it is I wasn't super stoked to have a stack of the Pacers early in the season, if I'm being honest. But now I'm kind of digging it. Let's go.
Yeah, so I mean, I thought Hallie should have been the rookie of the year that year that LaMelo won. He got injured and got cut a little bit short. So yeah, the Hawks lost 2 spots this week, went from 3rd to 5th. They didn't have a horrible week. They were 2-2, but you know, when the Cavs and the Pacers both go 4-1, you're going to lose some spots. Only other team I'll really call out in the West here, in the East here, is the Bulls, who had the weirdest week of basketball ever. They had wins over the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks, and losses to the Orlando Magic and the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Like, I didn't even catch that.
What a weird freaking week, man. Like, yeah, I mean,
wow, you gotta like bold that kind of thing on this. Like, I didn't even catch that. That is weird.
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, they stayed in 12th. Like,
so hold on, does that mean, is that okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, on a how much does this matter meter? Is that
it's not like football? It's not
that
like football.
Is like, hey, wait, if these guys can slip into the playoffs, it means that they're built to beat great teams.
No,
you know,
it's not like football where you're like, oh, what does it mean that Dallas beats Minnesota by so much?
Because with football, you have so few games, you have to try to squeeze every bit of meaning out of. And I forget I mean, it drives me nuts playing fantasy basketball, seeing some of my best players play 2/3 of their games, and that's it. And I go, get out of the court. But then they're like, I mean, do you want this guy available for the playoffs? I'm like, I don't know.
There's a whole, we could go down this rabbit hole on another episode, but there's a whole school of thought there that they should reduce the number of games to like 50 to 60 games.
Because owners love making less money.
Yeah, I mean, there's a world where it could make more money or the same amount of money, but that's a different rabbit hole. Another team that had a weird week of basketball, the Detroit Pistons, who are sitting in the Eastern Conference cellar, 11 games back from first, but took wins from Denver, who is 2nd in the West, and Utah, who is 6th in the West, and losses from the Lakers. They lost to the Lakers. Like, I mean, that it's not good. They lost to Sacramento. Sacramento is actually okay. They're in the Western Conference playoff like picture at least, and Phoenix, that's fine. But like, they beat Denver and Utah. So Pistons also had a weird week of basketball. That's just some of that's going to happen in basketball. The Bulls just had a particularly weird week where they like beat 2 really, really good teams and lost to 2 really bad teams. Like, they played some weird ball this week. But yeah, man, that is so I'll try and do those. Let's see. I don't know. We'll see how often I do them.
For you before we move off of this, because I think it's a nice way to put a button in it. And I like throwing a little zinger at you because, you know, I'm just here keeping up. You have much deeper analysis on the league than I do. From the hip, take 5 seconds to think about it, but from the hip, of the top 10 teams in the NBA right now, talent-wise, you know, or not talent-wise, like if they were to play like a 10-team tournament, like which 10 teams are suited for that right now? How many are in the East? How many are in the West? Without saying which teams they are, like gut check of East versus West. I mean, like, is it 5 and 5? Are they looking pretty equal here, or are there more of the top end teams emerging from the West? I feel like you're surprised by some. Like,
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think it's an 8-team tournament.
18,
I think there's
interesting. I asked for a top 10. You give me 8.
There's actually it's actually a 9-team tournament. Like, I wouldn't put a 10th really in the same category as the. So I'll tell you who the teams are.
I like that definitive answer. One conference is gonna be better than the other.
In the West, Suns, Nuggets, Grizzlies, Pels are all stepping up big time. There's some other potential, like the Warriors Blazers could be there. No, not Dameless, and
sure.
Yeah, and I still think jury's a little out on them, honestly. But like, yeah, so they're all like, they're very solid and they're playing very solid. There's some other teams that could be there, but I'm not totally sold yet. In the East, Celtics, Bucks, Cavs, Pacers, Hawks. I'm sold on all of those teams. So those are the 9 teams I'm really sold on as like contenders, basically. Is what
I guess that you feel stronger about the middle section of the West, but that kind of illustrates that like the top end is pretty split, maybe even a little bit leaning towards the East. That's very
the 9 teams I would say.
Anybody who doesn't know already, John has a little West Coast bias, like we all do on this podcast. In most of our sports, we tend to think the West is a little bit better, if anything, or neutral.
Fair, typically in basketball, the West is deeper, at least at the top. No, the top's the top, right? Like,
I think that's what we're talking about. Still, is similar,
right? Yeah. So, no, those are the 9 teams I would say are legit contenders right now. But after that, Look, are the Warriors probably, honestly, if like we went into the tournament now and the Warriors could get in, like I'm not going to count them out.
That's going to will them to victory. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm not going to count them out, but I'm not sold on them yet. Like those are the 9 teams I'm pretty sold on right now. Right. And I think they're going to continue to be good all season. And yeah, that's my take at the moment.
Interesting.
Moving through to some picks. Let's pick some games,
hey. Let's do it.
Yeah, I got another thing I'll put on the screen here.
All right, bro.
All right, so we're gonna pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 games this week. Just random number.
13 games. Okay.
All right.
Fair enough.
I'm going from the hip. Are you gonna go from the hip too?
I'm going from the hip. Yep. I don't have them decided. I'll ask that you at least start off the first one. Well, wait.
Yep.
I can start off the first one. No, you pick the second one. I'll do the first one. I'm taking the Warriors.
Yep.
Let's go.
Go ahead.
I'm taking the Dubs. Let's go. I'll pass it back and forth to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the Dubs as well.
Heck yeah.
Pacers, Clippers. I'm gonna take Indy. The Clippers are that team that will beat anybody, though. It's like,
see, this is surprising to me when you just said the Clippers probably have the better.
Pacers are playing more. The Pacers are playing more consistently.
I'll agree with that, and I'm gonna go with the Pacers as well. Let's go, Hallie, Turner, Stack.
Wolves, Wizards. These are 2 teams that are in similar spots in their respective conferences.
Oh, and this one's me, huh? Dang, Wolves and Wizards. Yeah, I don't really know what I'm looking for to be the tiebreaker here, but I guess I've been more surprised that the Wizards are here. Maybe? Yeah, I think so. And I'm going to ride that high, I guess. Yeah, I'm going to go Wizards. Let's go.
I think coming off a loss to the Dubs, Wolves are going to do it.
All right.
Cavs, Raptors. This isn't that. I don't know. I should have picked a better matchup. I got Cavs.
I'll go Raps.
Yeah, maybe that's why I picked this, because I knew you'd be tempted to go Raps.
You thought there was a high chance I might mess around.
There's a high chance I might steal
it's
that one.
Okay, first of all, it's so much easier for me to just kind of like toss some picks out there for basketball. I'm less invested in general than when I do the football picks. But honestly, so far, the data indicates that's a much better strategy for me, is to just be loosey-goosey about it, because I think about the football ones too much and I do terrible. And then so far, the only week we've done basketball, I have no idea how I picked as many correct as I did. I do, actually. It was pure luck.
It's like those classic like stories you hear about. Some person who
hit that other tab for the people, John. Show the people.
Week 1, Casey picked the first week that we did picks. Casey went 11-2. Quentin,
it's just because I'm so engaged in the NBA. I never miss like a story. I know all the headlines. I follow every narrative.
Yeah, it doesn't
do my homework. That's really what it is.
Quentin, who's not even here, who's also a big basketball fan, did horrible. He went 4-9. He got his Casey on. Like, that's what you're doing in football sometimes.
That's what I do with football.
And then I went 8-5, which is just like, okay, it's solid. But yeah, no, it's it's like those stories you hear about people who just say like, oh, is it a Bull? I think a Bull is better than a Jazz, so I think the Bulls will beat the Jazz. Speaking of Bulls, Jazz, this one's mine.
I'm like the girlfriend you ask, and she's like, I don't know who has the cuter uniforms. Like,
yeah. Which color do they wear?
I mean, that's hilarious. How I'm like, yeah, the Hornets, right? Because those starter jackets were lit. No,
yeah.
Anyway, all right. I bring this energy to this podcast. If you don't like it, drop a comment, and I'll stop. But I mean, you gotta drop a comment before I'll stop.
Bulls Jazz is like such a weird wild card, right? But I'm just going to say, if the Bulls continue to follow their pattern of only beating super good teams and the Jazz are not playing good right now, like maybe they take a win off the Bulls, or maybe I should just I'm doing this. I'm going to switch. So I win either way, right? Like either I win the pick or the Jazz win a game.
If I can be honest with you, I don't know. Was this? Yeah, it was your turn to pick. And I don't know. I'm honorable in this way. So I'm going to fess up to it. I was going to pick the opposite of whoever you picked in this matchup. Just because I'm the winner either way.
You know what? It was yours to pick first, too.
No, I picked the Raptors. Oh, no, you're right. Well, I'm going to take the Jazz. And I picked first. Now you're welcome to pick here. And you pick first on the next one. No, I'm just kidding. I'll take the next one. We'll swap here. But I was going to, I can't unknow that you're going to take the Bulls. So, I'll give you the option to switch if you want. And I'll take the opposite side. All right, let's go.
I won't.
How crazy is that? That changed your mind on a pick because
I was just messing with you. I'm taking the Bulls because that way I win it either way. They either win it. Either the Jazz win a game or I win the pick.
That's why I liked it better when I was the Jazz. I'm like, I really win either way. Either I beat you or like, I don't know. Or I get like, you can only beat me when you abandon your team. Like, no. Anyway, all right, moving on. I go first here, correct?
Yeah, Warriors, Mavs.
Well, Dubs. I mean, you're going to add the Dubs in to get them. Okay. All right. I'm going to pick them, usually. I mean, maybe not every time, but it's tough for me not to.
Clips, Blazers. This
that
one's a tough one for you. Oh, yeah.
This one's you. I did the Warriors, right? I did that one first.
Yep. Dame is probably out for the rest of this week as well, although he did come back from his last injury sooner than he was projected to.
Clips, Blazers. So, again, being the true, like, pure analyst that I am, I follow about 13 or 14 players very closely, which just happen to be the guys on my fantasy roster. And I got a guy by the name of Anthony Simmons. I almost said Simmons because it just feels like his name should be Simmons. I don't really actually know this guy, all right? But John filled me in. He's a good guy. He needs more opportunity in the offense, maybe young player. I think he's rising to the occasion here. I'm going to ride. Let's go, Blazers. I know Dame is, he's all pro level, but like we gotta have faith in our young guys. We're building programs over here on the West Coast, all right?
Here's a tough one for you to pick: the Wizards and the Nets.
Oh, nice. I appreciate
this is one of those weird ones where it's like, the Nets can pretty much beat anybody if they play well.
Yeah,
but
and
like,
you know what?
They're not usually,
I've already got the Wizards on a matchup this week, so let's go with the Nets. Yeah, I feel like that. And the Nets are coming up. Like, I think I've won most of the Nets matchups because I've mostly bet against them so far. So let's reverse the curse a little for them. Yeah. Let's give them some good juju.
This one's actually a tough one for me.
Well,
because I'm kind of riding that Kuz high. And the Wizards are in 7th. I'm like, good job, guys. I'll roll Nets. Okay, battle for the cellar in the West. I mean, the Rockets have the cellar pretty well in hand in the West, but the Spurs and Thunder are really battling for.
But you were talking like already like against the curve, like against the bell, like the bell curve.
The Spurs and Thunder really have that second spot, like to battle it out for. So, what do you think here? I know you have a bias. Oh, actually, this one's mine to pick. Huh?
It's yours, yeah.
Okay, before I pick, I would like to confirm that you have your pick in your head.
I do.
Okay.
I don't know that you can. I mean, the way we're playing this one, I feel like it's fair game to be variable. You can only do it on half the matchups, but I was going to go Spurs anyway.
Yeah, I knew you were.
You knew I was. Yeah, you knew that. And this one, I don't need to confirm. I don't need to confirm that you have it in your head. I'll keep rolling with the Pacers here. I don't hate their odds. I think that maybe it's just like, you get such echo chambers going on, but maybe it's easier to overlook the Kings. And I'm not trying to do that, like I'm an old like NBA street Kings fan, like Mike Bibby, right? Oh, Mike Bibby,
little Peja,
right? Like Chris Webber, right? Am I right there? Come on, let's go.
Vlade Divac, yeah.
You didn't know your boy could pull out like multiple Kings from the past. That's not everybody
so
can do
those
that.
Like 2000 Kings were really good. Yeah,
I mean, let's go. And I think they're gonna. They're going to make it a good game, but they're going to lose to the Pacers, who are just going to stay on a heater. Let's go. I gotta say, let's go.
I wish I had the other Pacers matchups on the top of my head this week.
Well, you got one up there. It's
I know. Clips.
I mean, you got them beating the Clips, so
I know. I wish I knew who they were playing between this.
Part of the game. I can tell you with 100% certainty, I do not know who they play between those games.
Okay, Nuggets Hawks. This is another tough one.
It's all you, bro.
2 teams at the top of the conference. Do you have your pick in your head?
Or are
you just gonna go opposite?
No, I'm not gonna go opposite. I do. I'll stay. I'll be honorable.
I got Nuggets.
Hawks was who I was gonna pick. And I feel like it's a mistake.
This is another one where I win either way because I have the Hawks backcourt and their center in
it
fantasy.
Just seems scary, man. If like the stars do align, it seems scary.
They're really good. Yeah, I mean,
a lot of talent.
Don't count out the Joker.
I don't know how long like the cores of teams tend to stick together in the NBA. But like the Hawks just seem like one of those like opportunities where if the core of that team can kind of just coalesce over like a few seasons, I mean, the sky seems like it could be the limit.
They have been, but then they added Murray to them. They added DeJounte Murray to the mix.
That's what. So I mean,
they've been doing this thing where they've been like, oh, we're slowly boiling. We're slowly boiling.
Yeah.
And then we turned up the heat on the oven by adding DeJounte Murray.
But that, I mean, even including him, like obviously it's a different level of it. But it's like now you're not simmering on like good to great. You're like, how good can this be? Like,
yeah,
I think that's a key. I'm a Murray guy. So maybe I was actually like poo-pooing them a little bit more. I think that really, I mean, who's the best player on that team? Are we for sure?
I think we'd still call it Trey at this point.
I think that's how big I am on Murray, at least.
Trey takes a lot of load. Trey takes a lot of load, honestly. It's like Trey gets criticized for having 6 or 7 turnovers a game or whatever. But if you actually look at his usage rate, it's like, okay, but the Hawks team turnovers are pretty low because essentially he throws all the passes, right? Like I love throwing turnovers are actually pretty low.
Sure. I love throwing impromptu questions at you. So like we talked about the 1-2 connection with Brown and with Tatum, which has the bigger talent gap from like 1 to 2 kind of, if you consider those the ones and the twos on these teams. From Trey to Murray.
Interesting. Or where's the bigger delta? Like how much better Tatum is than Brown, or how much better Trae Young is than
I
DeJounte
think we
Murray?
both say Tatum over Trey as far as like the top player on it. But is there a bigger gap down to Jaylen Brown?
That is an interesting thought experiment.
Because in my mind, it's especially smaller there. Like I'm not a fan of Jaylen Brown, but I got it close. I got Murray scraping at the heels a little bit, like, hey, I mean, I have a pretty
equal gap from those two.
I thought you might. Hey, that was a good question. Hey, come on.
Yeah.
Casey's paying attention to basketball a little bit.
I know it. Okay, speaking of paying attention, I do have 3 Pacers matchups from this week. I'm really trying to place the Pacers on our show.
I'm not sure there is a matchup between those other two now. You might have all their games this week.
So Pacers Jazz, this one's yours to pick first.
It is. And I'm going to ride. Let's go undefeated this week, boys. And this one, I'll let you set it up for. I feel like I put the pressure on you here.
So I think if they won these other 2 matchups, if they beat the Clips and then they beat the Kings, I do think they take a loss to the Jazz.
I love how different our boards look right now. I got to say, last time that worked well for me, but who knows?
Yeah. And we're both all in on this pick because this is like, if we would have flipped this and I took the Pacers and you took the Jazz on this one, then it would be a win either way thing, right? Because you have Pacers in fantasy. And I would have lost the pick, but I've
been long playing you to this matchup so that you're putting all your eggs into this basket at the end, and I'm going to win the week late.
Kings Clips.
This one's
Who
you.
else did I took the Pacers over the Clippers. I took the Clippers over the Blazers.
And you took the Pacers over the Kings too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Interesting. The Pacers played both these teams this week.
Yep. Kings Clips is a tough one for me.
And Kings, we both have the Pacers beating both of these teams, which is probably not a surprise to most people. But.
Right. Kings Clips, dude, the Clips are just they're so hard for me to pick, honestly.
You want me to go first? I'll let you know.
All right.
Oh, well.
I mean, you saw where I was.
Well, I wonder.
I'm right on the fence, but go ahead. You seem more sure.
Yeah, I was gonna. I don't know what it is. I was gonna go Kings. I was gonna go Kings. I swear.
I mean, you saw that I was about to go Kings.
I was gonna go, and I mean, I'd be only more likely to go against you. I don't want to go with you here on this, but I was gonna go Kings. I think that's something. We're pretty different on the Clippers. I think that's the one you're gonna have to keep forcing in to matchups because I think we're gonna.
Because I choose which games we pick. I could totally see myself phasing Clippers out because I'm like, they're so hard to pick for me.
Well, I'm all for it because since you're just selecting ones, if anything, you probably have a bias towards selecting teams you like. And
so the way that I try and select
those teams,
the way that I try and select which games is there in the NBA. There's so many games that are like really obvious, so I try to avoid those. And then from there, I go with it's either a difficult one to pick. That's why the Clippers show up so much because I see Clippers games and I always think they're difficult to pick. So it's either a difficult one to pick, or it's like it's an interesting cross conference kind of thing where it's like, oh, we got a like 7 seed versus 7 seed thing going on here. Or it's a key matchup. Like, oh, this is like Spurs Thunder is like, it's not super key because it's in the cellar, but like, it's like, like that could swap them spots in the rankings type of thing.
Hey man, you know what? This was a super fun episode to shoot. I'm feeling good about my picks regardless, because it's not even like my good picks from last time will offset if these go bad. The kind of week I put up in week 1 for basketball, I'm a winner on the season. I feel like, that's what I needed to get.
That's how I felt about my first week of football picks. Like I'm like, look, the fact that I blew it out in 1 week, I'm fine. Like I'm good. Like I could just retire.
I get it.
Good times, good episode. Everybody, thanks for sticking around on the Triple Cross podcast. Casey, say all of the things. Take us out, man.
Triple Cross, if you've made it this far into the video, you no doubt enjoyed yourself. So please let us know that by dropping a like onto the video. It would be much appreciated. It helps us kind of get some juice from the algorithm, and YouTube will then show our videos to more people, and then they have a chance to enjoy them as well. We can kind of cultivate a community. We can get this thing popping in here. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter, which John mentioned earlier in the episode. John, hit him with that Twitter handle one more time.
Twitter handle is at Triple Cross Pod. Instagram handle is at Triple Cross Podcast.
Ooh, don't forget the cast on the gram. No cast on the
Bird app.
on the Elon app.
On the Elon app.
Yeah, which is, let's go into that on one of these episodes, of course, too. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. Hit the bell icon so you get notifications, and you'll know when we go live. And then you can watch us live on this channel that you're watching right now. So make that a habit. And also, you'll see more picks that we do, and we'll see if I can keep this streak going. I doubt it, but this is starting to run really long. So I'm going to sign out and say, until next time, keep it real, Triple Cross.
Let's go.